In 1891, someone drew a bird's eye view of Seattle. But when you look at it closely, something's missing. The massive hills that the city would spend decades removing aren't there. They forgot to draw them. Or maybe there's another explanation. Between 1897 and 1930, Seattle moved 50 million tons of earth. They called it the Great Seattle Regrade. The official story says they removed several enormous hills to make the city easier to navigate. They used water cannons, steam shovels, and hydraulic mining to flatten Denny Hill and reshape the landscape. But look at the photographs from that time. Really look at them. There's something curious about these images. Seattle was barely 50 years old when this work began. The city was officially founded in 1851. The buildings in these photographs were supposedly built just 20 or 30 years before the regrading started. Yet some of them appear to be positioned in unusual ways. The first regrade started in 1897 on First Avenue. They finished it in 1899. Then from 1902 to 1911, they used water pumped from Lake Union to sluice Denny Hill into Elliott Bay. 20 million gallons of water every single day, aimed at the earth like a weapon. In 1929 and 1930, they came back for one final pass with steam shovels to remove what was left. The scale of this operation was massive. They moved earth across 60 different regrades. That dirt filled in the waterfront and created the industrial area now called SoDo. They even built Harbor Island, which was the largest man-made island in the world at that time. Now, let's look at what the photographs show. You can see multi-story buildings sitting halfway up what the records call natural hills. 15-story structures with their lower floors appearing to be below the dirt line. The technology of the late 1800s and early 1900s had limits when it came to moving massive buildings vertically. Construction typically worked by building upward. So what process was actually taking place here? In several images, you can see where the dirt meets the buildings. The line between earth and structure has an organic quality to it. In 3 specific photographs, the process becomes more clear. Workers are removing dirt from around large buildings. As the earth comes away, you can see that these structures had portions below the surface level. Not just a few feet. We're talking about entire floors. Consider this timeline. These buildings were supposedly quite new, perhaps 20 years old at most. How would a relatively new building end up with so much earth around its lower levels? In one photograph, you see a building that appears to be in poor condition. The roof has damage on the right side. The structure has an aged appearance. It's not a simple wooden building. This is substantial architecture. And right next to it, thousands of tons of earth have been removed. But there's no sign of active construction nearby. No workers rebuilding it. No materials staged for repairs. The building simply remains there. What was the plan for the structure? The photograph leaves this open to interpretation. Then there are the mounds. Massive piles of clay and earth shaped into distinct formations. According to historical records, these resulted from the regrading work. The shapes they formed are quite specific. They're not random accumulations. Some observers who study these images have wondered about their composition. Now, let's examine the water method they used. If you've ever tried to use a garden hose to move dirt in your backyard, you know what happens. The water creates erosion, then it collects. You have to wait for drainage before continuing. It's a gradual process. Seattle was pumping 20 million gallons per day from Lake Union. They aimed it at the earth in concentrated jets, then let it run through tunnels into Elliott Bay. The volume is remarkable. That much water would typically create significant pooling. But in the photographs, you see organized work sites. the ground conditions appear manageable. Exposed buildings stand without surrounding water. How was this managed so effectively? The photographs show some smaller buildings being relocated. That part aligns with known engineering capabilities. By the end of the 19th century, and definitely by the 1920s, engineers could move modest structures. But the larger buildings present a different question. Here's an interesting parallel. Seattle wasn't the only city dealing with unusual ground levels around buildings. Chicago went through something similar. Historical records there describe how they raised the entire city by at least 6 feet. They elevated buildings and filled in underneath them. It's curious that two major American cities would need similar large-scale adjustments within decades of their founding. This pattern appears in other locations too. Around the world, there are buildings with unusual level relationships. Lower floors that seem positioned oddly. Spaces below ground that have architectural features typically associated with main entrances, windows and doorways at unexpected depths. Some researchers refer to this as evidence of historical Earth displacement. The idea suggests that sometime in the 19th century something occurred, an event or series of events significant enough to affect building levels in multiple locations. The evidence appears in various forms across different regions. Seattle's historical records don't describe any local event that would add significant Earth levels around existing buildings. No earthquake that dramatically shifted terrain. No flood that left behind substantial sediment deposits. The historical explanation focuses on civic planning and accessibility improvements. But let's think about the timeline. Seattle was founded in 1851. By 1897, when the first regrade started, the city was only 46 years old. Most of the buildings were even newer. The area around Seattle had other flat terrain available. Up and down the coast, other developing cities didn't require similar landscape modifications. What factors led to these specific conditions in Seattle? Look at the 1891 bird's eye view in. The artist drew the city with attention to detail. Buildings, streets, the waterfront all appear. But the hills that would supposedly require decades of work and 50 million tons of earth removal, they're depicted differently than you might expect. Perhaps the artist simplified the landscape, or perhaps the illustration reflects what was actually visible in 1891. In 1889, just 2 years before that illustration, Seattle experienced a major fire. The entire downtown burned. Then, according to records, the city rebuilt remarkably quickly. They constructed 5,625 buildings in just 18 months. That's more than 10 buildings completed every single day for a year and a half. That construction pace is notable for the technology available in the 1990s. It raises questions about the methods and resources involved in that rebuilding period. The photographs from the regrade period show a city engaged in major earthwork. They show a process of removing substantial amounts of earth from around existing structures. The buildings revealed by this process have features that invite questions about their history and original construction context. When you move 50 million tons of earth from a city, you transform the landscape fundamentally. Street levels change. The relationship between structures and ground elevation shifts. The visible history of a place can be altered. The question worth considering is why such extensive earthwork became necessary. Why were substantial amounts of earth present around these buildings? And what does this tell us about Seattle's early development? What events shaped the city's landscape in the 19th century? The photographs preserve a moment of major transformation. They show a city redefining its physical form. But they also invite us to wonder what came before. What's your theory about what really happened? Leave your thoughts below.